Hi friends, welcome to this latest episode of the Nationalist View. We have with us Colonel Miri Eisin. Colonel Eisin, thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure and happy Diwali to everybody.
Thank you, Colonel Eisin. Colonel Eisin has worked with Israeli Defense Forces. She retired as a full colonel, and she's also one of the former advisors to the Israeli Prime Minister. And Colonel Eisin is also associated with Retd University as a senior fellow. She's an expert in counterterrorism, international relations, and geopolitical affairs. And she appears on various international television channels, as well as also speaks at a lot of conferences which are held by prestigious think tanks across the world. We are going to talk with her about what is happening in Gaza, and we have been tracking, we've been fortunate enough that Colonel Eisen has taken time out from her busy schedule, and she has in the past also shared her deep insights right since the October 7, 2023, when Hamas brutally attacked Israel. So now a ceasefire has happened under the supervision of US President Donald Trump. But Colonel Eisen, we have seen over the last 3 days, there are a lot of developments. Hamas seems to be taking back the territory which Israel is leaving. And on Sunday, two Israeli defense forces were killed allegedly by Hamas. I'm saying allegedly because the US, just about a couple of hours ago, I received the statement of the US president that they were rogue elements, they were not Hamas. So we will still have to verify that statement. But then Israel has committed, Israel has again said that it is committed to the truce or the ceasefire. Hamas has also said so. And on Saturday, US State Department had said that it has credible information that Hamas is going to attack civilians in Gaza. So this, do you really believe, Hamas will not do what it is, infamous for?
Hamas is a terror organization, and we need to distinguish between Hamas, that terror army that both started the campaign in attacking on October 7th and wants to prolong the campaign as much as they can. In that sense, that's why they built both the fortifications underground and using all of the urban areas, their positions, taking the 250 hostages. And I say that because here we are in a ceasefire, but they want to prolong the campaign. How do you prolong the campaign? You are a terror army. You're not a regular army. You're not a state actor. You have no responsibility. So you dress like you and me, Arun, in regular clothes. You're not dressed up as military. You fire at the Israeli Defense Forces positions, which are still inside the Gaza Strip. The ceasefire was not Israel leaves the Gaza Strip. No, the ceasefire was Hamas gives back the 20 live hostages and the additional, at this stage, 15 dead hostages. Israel redeploys in the Gaza Strip. And what's happened in the meantime is that Hamas gave back the live hostages and is not giving back the dead hostages. They're from the same attack. By the way, one of them was taken brutally by Hamas 11 years ago in 2014. People aren't aware that they have done this. This isn't a new modus operandi. And what they're trying to do in addition, Hamas, the terror army, not the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, Hamas, the terror army in the Gaza Strip, are trying to try out what they can, which means that they're going to come in civilian clothes, come and approach you, me, or in that case, me, the IDF officer. What you're going to see are civilians. And it's going to be Hamas always dresses as civilians only when they take films of themselves and post them online. Do they show themselves in a paramilitary uniform? But that's only when they post themselves. When you look at them, and that's one of the aspects of a terror army, is that they dress up in civilian clothes. They don't wear military clothes. And two Israeli soldiers yesterday, an anti-tank missile, an ATM, a guided anti-tank missile, was fired on an Israeli position in the new deployment lines and killed two Israeli soldiers and wounded, by the way, additional soldiers. So when we're talking about ceasefire or not ceasefire, this is Hamas playing the terror game. Oh, we're keeping the ceasefire. You don't see us attacking anything. No, because they dress up in civilian clothes. They fire from afar. They fire onto a position where Israel is. And when Israel responds into the area that we left, because they're firing from the area that we left, then it's Israel firing against what? Against a civilian spot. And I highlight it because we are going to see this every day, all the time. Hamas wants to legitimize itself and to delegitimize Israel. They are a terror army. They dress up in civilian clothes. They use all sorts of different type of weapons, and they'll continue using them.
So now, what's going to be Israel's endgame? So, in terms of its strategic objectives, both short term as well as long term, given this new situation? Because earlier we have seen it was clearly, dismantling of the terror infrastructure and getting all the hostages back. So now, partially, the alive hostages are back. Some of the dead bodies, they are yet to be handed over by Hamas. But now Hamas is back in Gaza. So, how do you look at the Israel's long term and short term objectives?
So there's two different aspects to this. One, Hamas never left Gaza and came back that they're back in Gaza. Hamas refused to give back the hostages after they took them so brutally, including the dead bodies. Some of these people were killed in captivity, but the bulk of them, and again, I want to highlight what a terror army does is that they snatched dead bodies as collateral, as negotiating terms. So what Israel wants is both to get back the additional 15 bodies. To be clear, most of them are Israeli, not all of them are Israeli. We brought back yesterday a Thai national. We brought back on a different day an Indian national. These are people who were working or in the different areas in Israel that were killed and murdered themselves on October 7th. And right now, there's still 15 bodies. And the first stage of this ceasefire, Hamas said, we will give back all of the 20 live ones and what we had said at the time, 28. And now it's down to 15 bodies, and they're not. They're continuing the campaign. They're prolonging it. They're making it as hard as possible. They want to show everybody that they're doing without doing. And it's very challenging for us. What do we want? We want the bodies back. This isn't bodies. These are the children, the fathers, the spouses of Israelis and non-Israelis that were brutally taken and should come back in our religion. You need to bring back and to bury a person and to have closure. And I think that any person can understand that. You don't want this as an open aspect. The second thing that we want, and it goes hand in hand, is for Hamas never to rule in the Gaza Strip or anywhere else for that matter. Not only not to rule, but that they should not carry arms, have arms, all of the arms that they've amassed and used, both in the campaign in the last 2 years, but also in the decades before that. These are two very challenging objects. Israel tried to do this militarily. Arun, we haven't succeeded in doing this militarily. Let's be clear. Why have we not succeeded in doing that militarily? Go back to my first answer. Because Hamas is in the civilian population. I'll even say they're part of the civilian population. They do not dress up as an army. They do not take responsibility. They do not enact war by the rules and laws of war. They are what we call a non-state actor, a terror army. They use civilian clothes and hide behind the civilians. And they want to prolong the campaign because their aim is to delegitimize us. So we want to disarm them, make sure that they don't rule the Gaza Strip, to allow and enable a different entity, a different leadership, different people, Palestinian and other Arabs, rule and run the Gaza Strip. That's what Israel wants. Will that happen? We're only at the first stage of the ceasefire. They haven't even given back the bodies. They're already trying to show in their own way, and what they're going to say is we're where we said we would be, but that's part of the game that they play, and it's a horrible game. And Israel at the end, within those ceasefire lines, yesterday both responded to that Hamas fighting and is trying to stop as much as possible. And then we stop because we all understand that when Israel uses its immense force, we do a lot of damage. Within that, we want to make sure that Hamas doesn't rule, try to disarm, not clear who will disarm them, and get back at this stage 15 bodies to be buried as they should be.
If we look at the larger picture, Israel, is facing this threat of political Islam. And so if we look at, political Islam versus Arab nationalism, and Israel is surrounded now by an area where we see extreme radicalization, right from, Hezbollah to Hamas to Houthis, even in countries like, Turkey, Egypt. So, there's a lot of radicalization. Qatar, of course, is there. So, how do you look at this larger, threat, and what can be done? How Israel is going to face this challenge? What kind of allies it requires?
One of the things that has happened in the 2 years since Hamas started their terror campaign against Israel has been clearing out lines and doing new and different alliances in the Middle East. And when I say alliances, people think of it in a positive way. Alliances at the end are those who come together. And what came together that we knew before 2023 was very much what we called the Shiite alliance, the Islamic regime of Iran that's Shiite, Iraq that has very large Shiite population, Syria that was under a Shiite Alawite dictatorship regime, and Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shiite. And I say that because when we look now into the future, what's come out, as you said, extreme Islam is the new version of Sunni Islam. Turkey is Sunni. I'll talk about Lebanon in a moment. The new regime in Syria is a Sunni Islamic regime. They're not portraying themselves as being Islamists. They're portraying themselves as being Syria on behalf of all Syrians. They've incorporated into that new regime Christians. They have spoken to Alawite Shiites, but they actually have not incorporated all of the different religions and ethnicities that exist in Syria. So it's very much focused on the Sunni, and the man who stands at the head of that, President Ashara, was the one who a decade ago, and that's not that long ago, was the head of Al-Qaeda in Syria. He has since renounced that, meaning he's openly stated that he's not with Al-Qaeda. By the way, he has not said that he's against Al-Qaeda. He's just said, I am for Syria. He hasn't said he's against the ideas of Al-Qaeda, which are the extreme Sunni Islam. So when you take all of that picture right now, for Israel right now, Lebanon to the north, Hezbollah, Shiites are weakened. The strengthening of the Sunnis, as long as it's moderate, that's okay. But why is it all so challenging for us? Because we were just talking about Hamas. And most people are not aware that Hamas's full official name is the Palestine chapter of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. Arun, in Egypt, Muslim Brotherhood is outlawed. In the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, that's Israel's southern border, and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan is Israel's eastern border. In Jordan, Muslim Brotherhood is outlawed. What is this new regime in Syria? Is it Muslim Brotherhood? Hamas is its own version of Muslim Brotherhood. And as you mentioned, also Turkey. Turkey, under President Erdogan, Erdogan's own party, is certainly, I would call it, a Turkish version of Muslim Brotherhood. So instead of having that Shiite instability crescent trying to change Middle East and Islam outside the world, the Islamic regime of Iran, the Syrian regime that supported it, Hezbollah, that was the main actor, we're now getting a new kind of possible negative Islamist crescent. That Turkey is very much backing Syria, very much backing this new Syria, and I'm not against the new Syrian regime. I'm against the new Syrian regime being one that calls for the annihilation of Israel and of that Islamist version, which I think in India you're very aware of, that calls for everybody else to be Muslim, that goes out in a very jihadi way. That's why we call them, some of them, jihadi Islamists, because they go out to call a holy war. And these are real challenges where we've switched from that Shiite very extreme version that was very bad. And I'm very glad that we decimated and destroyed it. That's good for the world. We haven't destroyed it, but that we decimated it. And I don't think that all Islam is like that, but I want to worry and highlight to people the challenge of when you get extreme types of Islam. And the last thing I want to say on that, and I'm not going to your borders, I'm going to go a little bit further to Afghanistan and the Taliban in Afghanistan. I'm going to say that type of version of Islamists, they don't call themselves jihadi. But I want you to look at that. And I'm saying within their definition of how they rule in political Islam, I, as a woman, would have no status. People who are not Muslim have a lesser status. It's a very harsh reality. And we need to have eyes open because I would not like to see Syria fall into that path, let alone Jordan or Egypt. As I say, Hamas represents a quite harsh example of that type of Islam.
How do you see, countries like UK and France recognizing the state of, Palestine and talking about, and there was a huge pushback against, both the French president and the UK prime minister within their own countries also. I spoke to a number of intellectuals, men, many of them bracket them as, right of the center, but largely the centrists also. So they were extremely worried. So, and it for a normal person, for a layman, for a normal person in this part of the world, it appears to be an anomaly because the Western Bloc seems to be aligned with Israel, and yet these two countries are recognizing, and we have seen in European Union Parliament also how Israel, there has been criticism of Israel. And then we see the Western media also. In fact, I was reading this New York Times report on this Sunday attack on in which two IDF soldiers were killed, and they have written Palestinian fighters. They have not written, Hamas terrorists. So how do you explain this, anomaly and to our viewers?
So I'm going to address this in two different aspects. The first I'm going to say is take note, all of the listeners, I always distinguish between Hamas, the terror army, which is made up out of Palestinians, but it's Hamas, the terror army, and Palestinians. And I'm not trying to make it less. The second thing I want to say is that Arun, as you know very well, India recognizes Palestine and have for many years. And in Delhi, you have a Palestine embassy and an Israel embassy, and yet we in Israel have strong ties with India, and that doesn't negate that. And all of the countries in Africa and most of the countries in Asia and all of the countries in Central and South America recognize Palestine, and there's nothing against recognizing both Israel and Palestine. What happened that's different in the UK and in France is that in the aftermath of the Hamas terror attack and the Hamas attack, what those countries said is now we're going to recognize Palestine, not Hamas. In the UK, Hamas is defined as a terror organization. In France, is defined as a terror organization. The EU defines it as a terror organization. And they said we're going to distinguish between Palestinians and Palestine and Hamas. But you know what? Most people don't know what I'm talking about right now. They don't do that distinction. What they see is that they recognized that in the aftermath of the Hamas attack, the benefit that the Palestinians got is from the most barbaric, horrific attack you can imagine. They got the benefit of being recognized. And certainly that's how we feel about that in Israel. I don't care that they recognize Palestine. As I said, I have no problem that India recognizes Palestine, but India recognized Palestine in the 67 borders. And defining Hamas as a terror organization and making those distinctions that have to do with what the terror army is, and that you can't, because the problem in that sense is the timing. It's like, really, after this horrible war, you're giving such a prize. They, in their terms, the Prime Minister of Britain, the President of France, have tried very much. If you read it, it says it's in the 67 borders, it's Palestine and not Hamas. They say all of those things, but most people don't notice that. So right now, what we're trying to understand is who thinks it really makes a difference to make that distinction now. Is this to impact, again, to pressure Israel? I, Miri, have always stood for two states. I don't want to rule over Palestinians, but I'm not willing to help establish a state that's going to be ruled by Hamas. And that's what happened in the Gaza Strip. Hamas took over there in 2007. And so here our challenge is in what I said right now, that by recognizing it, it's legitimizing Hamas. It's taking away in every way from what that terror army entity is. And it's putting the decision as if that Israel is the one preventing it, when all I'm trying to prevent is a country freely being established next to me, 10 kilometers away from where I'm sitting right now. And I'm in the heart of Israel in Tel Aviv, and I'm 10 kilometers from the West Bank. 10 kilometers, write that down. That's how far away. I don't know how far you go in India, 10 kilometers, you're still in the middle of Delhi. And so just for people to understand what that means and recognizing that state is both the closeness and that broad support there for Hamas. Again, if they want to establish a state and not call for my destruction, I'm all there. But that's not the voices that we hear from within Palestine. That's not the voices that you hear. Certainly, Hamas doesn't talk that way. And as such, it's really to give a prize to the terrorists as opposed to really giving something feasible in the future for the Palestinian people who don't want to annihilate me, who absolutely deserve full free, full future where I do not rule over them. I don't want to rule over them.
My last question, Colonel Eisen. Do you think this ongoing truce is actually sustainable?
I don't think there's an alternative, and that's why it's sustainable. Meaning, just like in the last 2 days, Hamas is going to try it out and make sure that you in India think that Israel is the bad guy and we're trying to attack and do all sorts of things. That's going to continue, but the truce is still on. And that has to do with the fact that we don't want to be in a war. We also don't want Hamas to annihilate us. But in between that, there's a lot of space. So it's not going to be a quiet time in the sense that because the war is not over. It's a ceasefire, not the end of the war. That doesn't mean the same things. And certainly it's not about peace. I think it's sustainable. I think it's constantly going to be challenged. Hamas is going to do that because they want you to legitimize Hamas and delegitimize Israel. And that's why it will continue. And we're going to and keep going because we need to rebuild our economy and we need to rebuild our society. And we still have tens of thousands of people whose homes were destroyed 2 years ago, and we haven't been able to do anything about that, not just down south near the Gaza Strip where Hamas attacked, but up north where Hezbollah attacked for a year. Nobody talks about that. So we have a lot of healing and rebuilding and reconstructing that we need to do as a society, let alone in the fact that we've become the most vilified country on earth. So we're going to sustain it. Okay, I don't see reasons that it'll be broken, but it won't be quiet.
Thank you, Colonel Eisen, for sharing such deep insights. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to listen to you, the way you dissect complex issues. And thank you so much. And we hope to host you back very soon. And
Thank you so, so much. And again, happy Diwali, and that we should all have only happy and hopeful times to look forward to.
thank you, Colonel Eisen.